Welcome to the audio notes for this weekend's concert program of Mozart&Now, or as I like to call it, Nowzart, with a Sunday matinee of And Now Mozart. This weekend, we celebrate the birthday of Austrian Wunderkind Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart, and consider his legacy by including works of three living composers who might be the Mozarts of the future. Each performance is a different program. The Friday program opens with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's Coronation Mass, then features a recent work by Atlanta-based composer Joel Thompson based on writings of James Baldwin, To Awaken the Sleeper, and finishes with the magnificent Gran Partita Serenade for 12 winds and string bass by Mozart. The Saturday program opens with Frenzy by American composer John Adams, then goes to Mozart's Haffner Symphony No. 35, and finishes with Gabriela Lena Frank's Conquest Requiem. The Sunday program puts together each of the three Mozart pieces for a total Mozart immersion experience. Because of the nature of these programs, I'm going to walk us through it in a Friday plus Saturday order in order to cover everything. So enjoy your Nowzart experience from now on. We'll start with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, our star for the weekend. He was born in 1756, died in 1791. He was an Austrian composer and was just 35 years old when he died, but he got a pretty strong head start having a famous composer-violinist for a father who also managed to open doors for him and get him situated as a child prodigy. He was writing some of his first symphonies by the age of 10 and became one of the most prolific and influential composers of the classical era, writing more than 800 works for all types of ensembles. The Coronation Mass in C major is nicknamed the Coronation, and this nickname did not come from Mozart. Instead, it seems to be a nickname attached in the early 1800s after becoming kind of the top hit requested for royal coronations and special events in the imperial court of Vienna. He began composing the Mass in 1782, following his marriage to Constanza, and as a way to smooth over his father's ire at having married without first introducing her and gaining his blessing. Mozart composed the solo soprano part with Constanza in mind, who sang it at the 1783 premiere. Curiously, this was a premiere only of the portions he had managed to finish, the Kyrie, the Gloria, and a portion of the Credo movements. The rest was supplemented by other sacred works, and he never ended up completing the Mass, leaving just drafts and fragments for scholars to discover later. The construction of the missing portions of the Mass only occurred in the early 1900s. In order to fill out the remaining portions, scholars have used notated vocal and instrumental lines, as well as sketches and fragments of the incomplete Credo, the Sanctus, and the Benedictus. No extant sketches or fragments of an Agnus Dei have been found, so this portion has been constructed completely from educated guesses. The Coronation Mass in C major is scored for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass vocal soloists, chorus, and a relatively small orchestra, which inexplicably does not include violas. Maybe he needed to give them some time off, to repay all their attentive work and adherence to the very highest possible artistic standards. Or maybe he finally got tired of writing in alto clef. Those are the most scholarly and definitely super probable options. Here are some fun facts for you. Mozart's mentor and fellow composer Franz Joseph Papa Haydn was so taken by the Coronation Mass that bits of it crept into his 98th Symphony and his Harmony Mass. The excerpt of the Kyrie, you may already know, was used in the film Amadeus to illustrate Salieri, the composer Salieri, observing, quote, the voice of God. I've attached that video and the live performance with autograph manuscript to follow along on the web page there for you. Let's move now to Joel Thompson, who's born in 1988. He's an award-winning American composer, best known for his 2015 choral work, 7 Last Words of the Unarmed. He is currently the first composer in residence for Houston Grand Opera and has been commissioned by many major institutions, including the New York Philharmonic, Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, Aspen Music Festival, Houston Grand Opera, and, as in the case of To Awaken the Sleeper, Colorado Music Festival. Joel Thompson composed To Awaken the Sleeper in 2021. It's a 20-minute work for narrator and large orchestra, structured sort of similarly to Aaron Copland's Lincoln Portrait, and it uses texts taken from James Baldwin. Narrating this performance will be spoken word poet Frankie LaTroy. From the composer, the insightful and prophetic words of James Baldwin have always been a source of solace for me, and never more so than during the last few years as the country has been forced to grapple with its identity. When commissioned to write a piece for Peter Ungen and the Colorado Music Festival in 2020, it felt like the perfect opportunity to amplify his words. James Baldwin sought to bear witness to the country that birthed him and hated him, a country that murdered his friends, Evers, King, and X, for speaking out against injustice. Despite the pain of those wounds, it is evident that although Baldwin didn't hesitate to hold our deeply flawed society to account, his words were rooted in an impossible love of his country. Though they were written decades ago, his words still ring true. Today, Baldwin asks us to look in the mirror and reckon with what we see. He asks us to examine the nature of power and its dependence on human will and desire. He asks us to go to the unprotected among us in order to examine our supposed love for justice. I like to think that if he were to reword his proposal today, he would include the immigrant, the refugee, the trans person, those without bodily autonomy under the law, and those suffering in the thrall of poverty. Baldwin acknowledges all the messiness and failure and genocide and death that has brought us to this point, and he asks us to build a new world where we truly value and support each other in all our differences. It is in that spirit that the piece was born, and I hope the same spirit can continue to move each of us toward a more perfect union. Powerful words from the composer there. Here's an excerpt from a review by Pierre Roux of Arts Atlanta. This was after a performance that opened the Atlanta Symphony season. At the start, the music explodes in kaleidoscopic. I'll start again. At the start, the music explodes in kaleidoscopic cacophony. A listener's ear jumps all around the stage manically, grasping for a phrase or a hook to hang on to. Soon, what might be an Ivesian marching band tune appears and fades somewhere in a thicket. It gets loud. It dissolves into sweeping blocks of sound. The orchestral colors are often dazzling. As narrator, Thompson, appearing poised and relaxed in a crisp brown suit, enters with the words, "So be it. We cannot awaken the sleeper, and God knows we've tried." Baldwin's stylish prose, every line of it could be reprinted to describe the key moments in Thompson's work. The composer doesn't brush past any of it, instead having the orchestra offer a running commentary on the text. In devastating moments, he knows how to thin out the orchestral scoring and let the words do the talking. Ask any Mexican, any Puerto Rican, any black man, any poor person. Ask the wretched how they fare in the halls of justice, and then you will know whether or not it has any love for justice or any concept of it. Moments later, he evokes the fife and drum to surround Revolutionary War language. When power translates itself into tyranny, it means that the principles on which that power depended and in which were its justification are bankrupt. When principles on a new world will be built, take us toward resolution, Thompson puts a halo of strings around it, perhaps borrowing from earthy English string serenades. Yet there's nothing cliched in his writing, no received musical wisdom. Thompson has his own story to tell. Thompson's music is alive and inquisitive, in constant dialogue with itself and with the text. He pays close attention to compositional craft without wasted effort. There's still a trace of the student in his writing, an overuse of cymbals rolled by soft mallets, like a slow-motion metallic splash, for example, but so much originality and lucid energy and stylistic confidence. He's an important voice to follow. I'd say that's a pretty good review. I am fond, as some of you know, of digging around and finding bad reviews of great artworks. This one needs a little more time on it to find a bad review. So far, there have only been good ones. I think that we probably are going to find only good reviews from now on. That does happen as well. Next up is another no viola piece, but at least this one has an acceptable reason for it. Wolfie Mozart's Serenade No. 10 in B-flat major, the Gran Partita. Mozart composed many serenades, pieces of music ordinarily expected to be light background entertainment for parties like a home stereo system made of human instrumentalists. Serenade No. 10 in B-flat major bucks this trend by drawing attention to the work rather than letting it fade into the bushes like Homer Simpson. The Serenade is specifically scored for harmony plus string bass. A harmony is a small group of wind and brass instrumentalists ordinarily employed by a wealthy aristocrat during the 18th century classical era. Harmonium were commonly used for larger functions or outdoor parties, since the sound of the wind band was typically louder and could therefore better carry to people's ears. In this particular case, Mozart decided to use two oboes, two clarinets, two basset horns, which is an early version of the clarinet with a richer, mellower sound, two bassoons, four French horns, and string bass for, extra coolness. No viola, though, that would have put it right over the edge. To experience more and learn more about this piece of music, please do watch the video interview that I have with Jason Schaefer, our principal clarinetist of the Colorado Symphony. There you'll learn all kinds of things, including a little bit more about the basset horn. The Gran Partita was nicknamed later after Mozart had died. It was composed between 1781 and 1784. We don't quite know when it was finished, but four of the movements were premiered in March of 1784. So we know it was at least finished by then, by a cobbled together group of servant musicians called from the harmonium of various different Austrian households who were choosing to use their vacation time during Lent to take on an extra gig. No joke, this is a major work for wind ensemble. There are 7 movements, and a typical performance lasts 50 minutes, 50 minutes. The 7 movements are a largo, molto allegro combo. That's a slow and very lively combo, followed by a minuet, which is a dance in a waltz time. Then we have an adagio, a slow movement. This one features the oboe, the clarinet, and the basset horn in a sort of a conversation among 3. Then we have a second minuet, followed by a romance, and then finally a theme and variations. And in this case, there are 6 variations, and the final one is a quick waltz time dance. So it's sort of an every other dance feel in this 7 movement work. We finish with a finale, which just means ending. This one is in rondo form, and it's commonly used in the classical era, which features a frequently recurring theme throughout. It's sort of prototypical Mozart at his most playful and joyous. I have videos of performances, live performances of the Gran Partita on the website, plus the scene from Amadeus where Salieri describes the beginning of the Adagio movement. Now, we come to a symphonic work that has barely existed for more than a couple years. So let's start with a quote from the composer. I find starting a new piece is just always unbelievably frustrating because I think I know what I want to do, but then day 1 comes and I have that horrible sinking feeling that it's all over and that everything from here on is just going to be crap. The first hand scratches you put down are always clumsy, and I try to console myself and think that what I'm looking for is the DNA. What is this piece about? What's its genetic makeup? The creative process is so absolutely buried in obscurity, and usually it takes me months before I have that first good day and say, okay, this is bar 1. It sucks, but I'm going to live with it anyway. That quote is from a Toronto Symphony interview with John Adams, multiple Grammy winner, Pulitzer Prize recipient, and one of the world's most performed living composers. I guess the struggle is real. John Adams, born in 1947. Composed Frenzy in 2023. It is his most substantial full orchestra work since City Noir in 2009, and is filled with the kind of pulsating energy and languid melodies as his insanely cool 1985 symphonic work Harmonielera. Frenzy is still very fresh and has had only a handful of performances since its 2024 world premiere. The Colorado Symphony will give its New York premiere February 1st at Carnegie Hall and will be the 7th orchestra in the world to perform it. You can hear it at Betcher Concert Hall on Saturday, January 24th, as part of the Mozart&Now program, and on our New York Tour Send-Off concert program Tuesday, January 27th. John Adams wrote about his work. Frenzy is a one-movement symphony that in the course of its 20 minutes encompasses a variegated yet unified symphonic structure. Its title notwithstanding, the piece is generally buoyant and extroverted and postpones its real frenetic energy to the concluding moments. What makes Frenzy unique in comparison to my other works is its focus, almost to the point of obsession, on the development and transformation of small, vivid motives that continue to resurface in various guises throughout the piece. This kind of classic development treatment of motivic ideas differs from the gradual change via repetition technique in my earlier minimalist-influenced works. In fact, once completed, Frenzy revealed itself, much to the surprise of its composer, as a melding of the two approaches toward musical form. On the one hand, its rhythmic event horizon is still essentially pulse-driven, while on the other, its melodic world is about shape-shifting and the spinning out of ideas. The opening bars present two contrasting gestures: a punctuated tattoo in the winds and brass, and an urgent muscular theme in the upper strings. Both these ideas reappear throughout the piece, always transformed in one way or another, and yet always identifiable. In place of a slow movement, the music's surface simply quiets down. Density and forcefulness yield to a feeling of lightness and transparency. The pulse is still there, now carried along by a congenial interplay among the two harps and celeste, while the strings sing a lyrical melody that floats above them. The final section is indeed frenetic, with hard-driven, choppy string figures, tsunami-like waves of brass, and madly scurrying woodwinds, all of which come together to earn the piece's title. Quite a walk through the piece from the composer there in those concert notes that he has written. I find this piece, Frenzy, to be very, very indicative of John Adams's major stylistic elements, and I've always really enjoyed playing his music. This piece makes a kind of organic, holistic sense to me as a musician, as a player, as someone who's experienced John Adams's music on multiple occasions. I think this is a really great sort of taut example of the culmination of a lifetime of composition and of deep thinking about what music is and what it can be and how it moves through space and time. So you'll definitely enjoy it. Continuing with the apparent theme of music by Mozart all composed around the same time and that got nicknamed by someone else and either wasn't entirely completed or possibly started out as a different type of piece than it ended, we have Symphony No. 35, the Haffner. Symphony No. 35 in D major was commissioned by the Haffner family of Salzburg, hence the nickname. Mozart composed it in 1782. The first sketches were meant to be a serenade for one of the Haffner's ennoblement ceremonies. This was actually at the request of Leopold, Mozart's famous father. Mozart also was composing his Mass in C major and reworking his opera, The Abduction from the Seraglio, during this time, and was kind of feeling the heat about an upcoming move to Vienna and getting some grief from Leopold about choosing to marry Constanza. He essentially crammed it in, sending to Leopold in chunks as he completed them. This music was not finished in time for the ennoblement ceremony, but it had a test run in performance in 1782 before Mozart reworked it into what is now the symphony for a premiere performance in 1783. So, half-done serenade becomes fully done symphony. The Haffner symphony is in 4 movements: Allegro con spirito, which means lively with spirit; Andante, which is a walking pace; Minuetto, a waltz time dance; and Presto, a very quick pace. A typical performance lasts about 20 minutes. Here are some fun facts for you. The premiere of the Haffner Symphony happened on March 23, 1783, exactly 1 year prior to the premiere of his most famous serenade, the Gran Partita, which is also on this weekend's programs. The concert was an epic "and now Mozart" show, kind of like the Sunday matinee that we're going to be doing. It kicked off with the first 3 movements of the symphony, then an aria from his opera Idomeneo, followed by Piano Concerto No. 13, then another aria, then the contretemps movements from Finalmusik, then another piano concerto with a reworked final movement, Koschel 175, and another aria, and then he improvised a fugue for the Emperor, followed by 2 sets of variations on themes by other composers, and then finally, he finished the concert with the last movement of the Haffner Symphony. I mean, that is just a lot of interstitial material for a symphony premiere. Now we come to the big muscular programming response to Mozart's Mass on this weekend's performances, with a great feature for our wonderful Colorado Symphony Chorus and soloists. Gabriela Lena Frank, born in 1972, is an American composer, pianist, and mentor. She was born in Berkeley, California. Her father is of Lithuanian Jewish heritage, and her mother is Peruvian and of Chinese descent. This multicultural heritage, and especially her mother's Peruvian culture, figures strongly in all of Frank's work. She frequently incorporates not only rhythms and harmonies associated with Latin American cultures, but often includes folk instruments like the pan flute or charango alongside traditional Western European instruments of the orchestra. She quotes, I think the music can be seen as a byproduct of my always trying to figure out how Latina I am and how gringa I am. Gabriela Lena Frank's music has been commissioned and performed by major ensembles around the world, including the symphonies of San Francisco, Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, and Cleveland, the Kronos, Brentano, and Chiara string quartets, Silk Road Project, and most recently premiered her opera El Último Sueño de Frida y Diego at San Francisco Opera. It debuts at the Metropolitan Opera this spring. In 2025, Frank was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Letters and was named Composer of the Year for 2026 by Musical America. Gabriela Lena Frank composed Conquest Requiem in 2017 for full orchestra, chorus, and soprano and baritone soloists. The Latin and Spanish libretto, including some Nahua language, is from Nilo Cruz. Gabriela Lena Frank wrote this about Conquest Requiem. Much has been written of the violent meeting of the old and new worlds today, the old and new worlds that produced the Americas, North, Central, and South, known to the world today. Over the centuries since, key figures have emerged: conquistadores Cristoforo Colombo, Hernan Cortés, and Francisco Pizarro, chroniclers Bernal Diaz del Castillo, the native Garcilaso de la Vega, and the Dominican friar Bartolome de las Casas are especially emblematic of the cataclysm that was the conquest. These men and countless others bore witness and oftentimes great responsibility for the death and destruction of entire societies while simultaneously having a hand in the birth of new mestizo, mixed race, civilizations. Against such grand historical strokes, the stories of ordinary people are easily swept away but for the efforts of creative imagination employed here in the Conquest Requiem. This piece is inspired by the true story of Malinche, a Nahua woman from the Gulf Coast of Mexico who was given to the Spaniards as a young slave. Malinche's ever-evolving prowess as an interpreter of her native Nahuatl, various Mayan dialects, and Spanish elevated her position such that she could convert to Christianity and become mistress to Cortés during his war against the Aztecs. She would later give birth to their son, Martín, one of the first mestizos of the New World. While Malinche has been conflated with Aztec legends, she has been variously viewed as feminist hero who saved countless lives, treacherous villain who facilitated genocide, conflicted victim of forces beyond her control, or as symbolic mother of the new mestizo people. In the Conquest Requiem, Malinche's story is the linchpin for the juxtaposition of traditional liturgical verses from the Latin Mass for the Dead against Nahua poetry as chronicled from the mouths of fallen indigenous princes. Newly composed Spanish words from the playwright and poet Nilo Cruz round out the text. These these concert notes by Gabriela Lena Frank, really tell the whole story of Conquest Requiem. It is made up of 7 movements, which have Latin Requiem as well as Nahua titles. For example, the Requiem begins with introit, Cuicatl de Malinche. The introit is a Requiem Mass, a solemn chant, and Cuicatl de Malinche translates to Song of Malinche, the primary character in this Requiem. So we already in the first movement have that combination of the Latin Mass and the new interpretation with the Nahua language. The 7 movements are introit, Cuicatl de Malinche, the chant and song of Malinche, Judex ergo cum sedebet, when the judge takes his seat, that's from the Latin Mass. Then a combo, Dies Irae, Cuicatl de Martin, Day of Wrath, Song of Martin. Then the Recordare Jesu Pie from the Latin Mass, Remember, Merciful Jesus. Then we move to Rex Tremende, El Aullido de Malinche, which is Tremendous King from the Latin Mass, combined with the Howl of Malinche, there from Spanish. Then we move to the Confutates Maledites from the Latin Mass, When the Wicked Are Rebuked. And then finally, In Paradisum, Bendición de Malinche y Martín, Into Paradise, Blessing of Malinche and Martín. Frank described the sound world of Conquest Requiem as, quote, a freely tonal language that is colored by atonality with readily perceivable rhythmic and melodic shapes. Orchestral colors are quite important to me as they paint a landscape of the new world. She continued saying that she hopes this music will help, quote, in demystifying and de-demonizing harmful myths. Our country's greatest strength has always been its diversity. I have long been drawn to mythology and folklore with its frequently close ties to spirituality, and freely confess that from time to time I witness an event or visit a place or meet a person whose very incandescence gives me pause. It is perhaps from this place that I chose to honor those who have gone before us, not simply in a piece entitled Memoriam, but Requiem. A typical performance of Conquest Requiem lasts about 38 minutes. I have YouTube videos of each of the movements on the website. This weekend's programming is incredible as a compendium of the expression of human experience. Not only do we have three of Mozart's most muscular works in his output, all written within a period of 3 or 4 years of one another, but we also are including three new works, new to most of us, works by established composers and also by a new voice on the scene in Joel Thompson. I would really strongly recommend that if you can, you come to both the Friday and Saturday evening performances so that you can hear all of this in context, juxtaposed with the new and the old. It will make the Mozart sound new again in some really interesting ways, and it really couches the newer pieces within the context of all of classical music tradition. If you want the very full experience, you can come on Friday and Saturday evenings and on Sunday afternoon, and in that way you can hear the Mozart pieces twice, including, not to sweep it under the rug at all, but the Gran Partita, the 50-minute work, the Gran Partita for 12 winds and string bass, which is just an incredible way to feature our woodwind and some of our brass soloists from the orchestra. It's front and center, and not blending in with this massive string section or all of the percussion. It's a great way to really get a chance to hear them shine. Enjoy this program, and thank you so much for listening and for coming and supporting the Colorado Symphony. See you next time.